José Gago, you've played a leading part in policy on the information society in Europe, and you're a director of CERN, of course, where the World Wide Web got started, with a little bit of help from Tim Berners-Lee. Isn't the lesson of science, and indeed the culture of the web, that innovation is increasingly a collaborative undertaking? Won't education also have to allow more room for users and developers to create their own applications?
Yes, my answer is yes. I think one of the challenges that most countries are facing, and I fear that many of them will not be able quickly to respond to the challenge, is how to integrate informal education with education, what is outside school with what happens inside school. For instance, project work in school. Project work in school requires the quality and competence of teachers, requires resources, requires time. The capacity of schools to include the interaction and the proximity with the workplace or with research outside school is extremely important and can only be done if there is a movement outside school promoting that. One cannot ask schools to do it by themselves alone. Encouraging differentiation, encouraging that some teachers, some schools will be able to do it, while others are still not doing it. I think it's key for that. Policies cannot promote uniformity in this. Innovation requires freedom to innovate, and freedom to innovate requires a system where you just encourage innovation, encourage differentiation, encourage...
Can you teach innovation?
I don't think you can teach innovation, but you can learn by example.
Okay.
You can socialize to innovation. I think socialization is probably the best concept.
You can produce an atmosphere of innovation, is what you mean.
It's more than an atmosphere. Innovation is just a response to a challenge and trying to address challenges the way you can, with the means you can, as you can, and you must invent it because these conditions are not repeated elsewhere, because people are different, institutions are different, your students are different, of course. So you have to do it yourself, and you must get proud of it. And someone must recognize what you have done.
Exactly, and most importantly, support it. Anthony Salcito.
May I just add something? I was thinking this morning when I was looking at this stage, the prize for education, the Wise Prize of Education, I was thinking of a kind of index, of world index on innovation in education. Because if the prizes addresses institutions and individuals, world indexes, addresses politicians and policymakers.
You don't mean a league table?
They don't like to be on the bottom of the index.
Interesting way to measure innovation. I mean, difficult enough with the league table of schools, let alone innovation. Anthony Salcito, one model people like the technology guru Tim O'Reilly has proposed is that education might become something like a platform which allows people to add applications and services to, whether from schools, software, private companies. Do you think that's a good direction? Do you think that's the direction we're heading in?
I think there's a broad canvas with regards to what the cloud and technologies like that can deliver. Certainly user-generated content, both a global community of teachers sharing ideas, lesson plans, feedback is certainly welcome, as is the support of a wide variety of content mixes. But I actually think we're beyond the conversation around innovation if this is the discussion, because fundamentally what we're talking about is automation. A lot of the content initiatives right now are just automating traditional content. We haven't even thought about transforming the learning opportunities. And this is one of the gaps that we often find. The path to technology transformation often gets hit by the automation focus. We're focusing on just creating digital versions of everything we have in the physical world.
Exactly.
We've got to think differently about the core. You know, with the technology existence, 77% of the world's populations carry around an internet-ready mobile device. And that is certainly true in most jobs around the world, require some connection with technology and the internet. We've got to ask ourselves, if we have access to a search engine with the world's information at our fingertips, why are we still testing and teaching the same way we did hundreds of years ago? And that conversation requires a fundamental shift. And technology should always be the answer to questions we ask. So I actually say, thinking about gadgets and whatever, that's an answer to a broader question that I think we need to continue to push forth.
Professor Cheng, we've been talking about innovations. Aren't more incremental approaches to innovation in education also important?
Yes, I would like to follow Anthony's point first.
All right, well, the point I'm making is change happens little by little, gradually.
Okay. I think there are three major indicators for future innovation. The first one is that whether we can help our students' learning become globalized. It means that they can be globally networked and benefit from the world-class material, the input from different parts of the world. This is a very important point. And the second indicator related to localized learning. It means that whether our student learning can have the local relevance, related to the culture, related to the local community. This is important. And also we want to release the potential of our individual student. It means that the
because that's the point
learning,
I wanted to make, that with innovation and technology, you can sometimes leave out the human dimension. You say bring it back in.
Yes, it means that if no matter what kind of technology we use, if we can achieve these three major indicators, we will have the future for our students. That is my response. So
do you think technology brings people together, or do you think it hinders relationships?
Technology, for example, use the network. Technology can bring people together. But technology itself only a tool. The question to us is that for what purpose? Yes.
Yeah. What's the target? What's the reason? And I'll put that question to you, Denise Aguiar. Your schools stress the importance of relationships and bringing people together. Do you think technology can help that or hinder it? And I hope we have a translation ready to take your words this time, and not just half of it. So let's just check. And if there's not there, then we'll move on, if you don't mind.
Without a doubt, technology brings people together, I think. And the example is here and now. We're all here, and people can see it from different parts of the world. There are people asking questions, online. And we're going to answer questions, that came from people that we'll never see. So it's an example of technology bringing people together. And I think technology also makes children write more, which they didn't before.
You think technology helps children write more? That's very interesting. Stephen Geiger, I don't know how you arrive at that conclusion. To what extent is the human dimension also important for innovation in industry?
Innovation from the industrial side is, I think, just as important as innovation in the educational system. And in our university, we have the ability to merge two, which we're trying to plug a fundamental gap in the Russian educational system after the fall of the Soviet Union. Before that, most of the researchers in basic research got their orders from either the military or the government. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, there was a vacuum that hasn't been filled yet. So part of our task at Skolkovo in building this new institute is to plug this gap between research that the basic researchers are doing and the real needs in the marketplace by bringing together industry and educating industry, both major Russian corporations as well as international corporations, how to start to do innovative contract research at this university. So in our sense, we're actually bridging those two worlds between innovation, teaching innovation on the academic side, as well as trying to introduce innovation into industrial thinking, that this is a tool and a resource that they can use for commercial benefit. So we're merging the two worlds in this new institute, which is quite exciting.
Has it been easy to merge those two worlds?
I'll let you know when we actually finish it, but right now we're working very hard to bring the two together. Again, this is all about culture change. Not only are we trying to change the culture of the academic and the research communities in the country, we're also trying to change the mentality in the major corporations to begin to look at contract research at universities as a major tool for advancing their own products and services.
That's a key point. And anybody else want to come in on that point before I move on? Anthony, you are in agreement, but that is extremely vital about how you move forward and merge and get the if you like, proponents right to take that forward.
Just one last minute. The reason is fundamental, because if you don't have the feedback mechanisms, these researchers are out there spinning their wheels in the laboratory. They really aren't getting market signals, what's necessary. And by producing these networks and contacts through contract research, corporations and venture capitalists can provide signals to the researchers that you should focus on this. It's more likely to become a commercialized product sooner. And that feedback mechanism is extremely important to bring innovation to the market faster.
Won't they only then invest in products they think could be useful for them commercially?
That's part of the research they do. Then there's also the more blue sky fundamental research that is typically funded by governments, national science foundations, et cetera. So you need a balance between contract research for medium and short term, as well as the longer blue sky research that's typically funded by foundations and governments.
Interesting. Yeah, sure.
May I give you just two examples on
very briefly, if you will.
Of non-innovation. There is almost no innovation in the relation between undergraduate studies at universities across the world and research. Undergraduates are not involved in research. That was not the case in the best universities before the Second World War, when numbers were very limited. I remember that when one famous physicist, Mariano, went to see Fermi at his lab in Rome before he fled to the United States. He was an undergraduate. Some of his papers were published when at the same time he was still studying at the university. That's no longer the case. Students have not the possibility of being engaged in research. But that happened when, for instance, in Europe and the United States, when we had 20 years ago a lack of people to do informatics. We had to rely upon students to enter project work. The other non-innovation that we have is that it's strange that we have the capacity of students interacting with each other across the world, but there is no education for peace and for tolerance that is embedded in the school system that says, well, you must at least once a year do some project work with students with different religions, different language, different tradition. That is that should be part of national policy.
Let's move on to Professor Cheng. You mentioned earlier that educational innovation and reform has been based on a model of competition. How do newer models for collaboration fit in with that?
We can say that the education reform, on one hand, create opportunities. No matter for policymaker, for teacher, for parent. This is the positive side. And also, education reform have the political side.
Always does.
Particular teachers, they have to have more workload. They have to change. You see that. How we can build up the partnership and alliances to support reform, to support the innovation is a crucial challenge to all of us. Because, we depend on teacher only. It is difficult. How we can attract the private sector, the public sector, work together to create the platform, with the knowledge-intensive and supported by technology.
So what you're saying is there should be maybe a Silicon Valley for education? Is that what you want?
Pardon?
A Silicon Valley for education?
Hopefully, yeah, we have. We need the support from all sectors.
José Gago.
I thought Silicon Valley was about education.
No, it's about money. José Gago, what would be an effective innovation ecosystem, do you think, involving education research, teacher-led or community-led innovations? Again, briefly.
I think the ecosystem now is in innovation in education is becoming international. Of course, there are many examples, and here and at this conference you see many examples of extraordinary work done in local schools or in local communities.
Very much so.
However, the fact that we realize that they exist requires an international environment like this one.
Okay.
The fact that they come here to transmit this requires an international environment. I think innovation in education is increasingly international and should be increasingly international because it adds to, and I would insist on this point, precisely because we are here in this region of the world, because it may add to tolerance and to peace.